Shabbat Shalom. I say Shabbat Shalom knowing how many people are not b'shalom, are not at peace in Israel-Palestine. And I say this having been reminded by my very brief trip that in Israeli society, such greetings are spoken in a heartfelt manner, always with the meeting of the eyes to convey sincerity. Folks really do register and appreciate our tradition's reminders to stop and feel shalom, or pause to feel the Hanukkah light. They seem to make an effort to feel Reb Nachman's famous call, Liyot B'Simcha, to maintain a state of joy. Secular and religious alike seem to find comfort in these touchstones. Peace be with you. We're kindling light. Hold on to joy. The residents of Kiryat Shmona, a town 3 miles from the Lebanon border, are now relocated in hotels in Tel Aviv. We 8 rabbis gathered them to create a modest Hanukkah party. And I watched them clap and dance and sing Mitzvah Gedola Lihiyot B'Simcha. It's a great mitzvah to live in joy. Tears just streaming down my cheeks. It was our last night, and with all that I had borne witness to over these packed 60 hours, this brought me to tears. How could they sing this and dedicate each of their Hanukkah lights to loved ones killed or serving in Gaza or missing? Everywhere I went, I saw capacity for friendliness, patience, sensitivity, gratitude for simple pleasures. I had forgotten these characteristics of the typical Israeli, who also has no concept of what it means to wait one's turn, or stand in a line, or allow another to finish their sentence. I brought with me cards and letters written by you all to individuals in Israeli society. All were delivered, some to army bases and schools where they are disseminated, but many by me personally. And there was not a single instance in which reception of a letter or card was not met with wonder, amazement to be considered. I watched soldiers taking lunch at a truck stop return attention to their child-made cards repeatedly as they ate, pointing and holding them up to each other and laughing in bemusement, and I think delight. The 5-star hotel we stayed at in Tel Aviv is housing over 1,000 refugees from the north. Lower income religious Sephardic families with too many kids to keep track of. Children were banded together, wild, out of control. The rabbis agreed that we were reminded of the Lord of the Flies. But it really wasn't funny. It was very scary. Vacant-eyed mothers wheeled buggies around the lobbies and lounges as their children skateboarded past and around them, and fathers seemed largely absent from the public spaces. Their situation and demeanor was the most frightening reality check for me. There are reports of spousal abuse in these hotels, and there are reports of drug abuse among the youth whose imaginations are not captured by the school and recreational programs provided for them on site. One morning, we were asked to please leave the room in which we were meeting because it was needed for a family recently released from captivity in Gaza. We moved to an adjacent room from which we heard the screams of an 11 or 12-year-old boy. Not the screams of a tantrum, but primal screams. Later, I learned that this family, mother, son, and daughter from Kfar Aza, had been taken hostage, the father and older sister murdered before their eyes. Now they were staying in a large hotel suite, together with their grandparents, the parents of the murdered father. They were far from ready for return to society. Their kibbutz has been relocated en masse because it's considered healthier for groups to stay together in their milieu. And the plan is to find this family an apartment nearby so that they can re-enter in their own time. So much care and thought. Still, how will these families return to normalcy? I've never experienced a population like our hotel refugee contingent, except once on a Menominee reservation in Upper Wisconsin, where I volunteered for a summer as a completely unprepared teen. I was afraid of the reckless, pent-up energy I felt in the kids on the reservation. And I was afraid to approach individuals at our Tel Aviv hotel. But your letters, particularly the letters to mothers, gave me a way in. One evening, I stood at the entrance to the dining room, stopping a mother or a grandmother, saying, Slicha, ani mekihila b'Canada, v'hanashim b'kihilatenu kadvu michtavim, dafka la'imahot, lahagid lachem, she'anu choshvim alechem, u'levarech etchem b'chag Chanukah sameach. Excuse me, I'm from a community in Canada, and our women have written to you, the mothers, to let you know that we're thinking of you and that we wish you a happy Hanukkah. Each time they looked up suspiciously and then slowly melted into a surprised gratitude to have been thought of. And they thanked me again and again, coming back to thank me again. They kept saying, Canada? Be'emet? In Canada? Really? And in some instances, conversations ensued. The pages of stickers you gave me to distribute, I like to think these precipitated a few moments of calm for a few children. Outside the strange world of the hotel, the famous can-do Israeli resourcefulness is back. Israeli ingenuity, Israeli unity of purpose and agency. It's back in spades. Everyone I spoke to reported a sense of increasing national depression during the past years, the years of the Netanyahu administration. And all reported that the country has now thrown off its dejection for the sake of unity in action. There's some division of opinion, but to my surprise, I did not meet anyone who wanted to overthrow the government now. 80 to 90% of Israelis want Netanyahu out, but they don't want to act now. They don't want to fracture the unity of purpose with which the country is rising. They want to finish the war in accord and then return to internal politics. In addition to the hundreds, engaged in regular, ongoing volunteer positions at each of the Achim Laneshek, in English, brothers or brothers and sisters in arms, sites. Thousands of day volunteers show up at 7 a.m., 6 days a week to be deployed, whether receiving, sorting, packing, or delivering goods, or deployment to the fields for tasks of fall harvest. Everyone I met was contributing to volunteer efforts according to their skills and also just doing what's needed. I had time for 2 personal visits. One with my dear friend, Naama Kelman, Dean of the Hebrew Union College Rabbinical Program in Israel, and one with my dear cousin, Avi Novus Deutsch, Dean of the Schechter Seminar, a conservative movement rabbinical program for Israelis. Nami has retired and picks cucumbers and attends all Shiva minions in a certain region. Avi has taken a sabbatical and works therapeutically with refugees relocated to his kibbutz and maintains a daily practice of dedicating a teaching to a life lost. Every day he researches and posts a short biography and a photograph of a young life lost, followed by the summary of a chapter of Mishnah. Yesterday, the life he lifted up with his Mishnah study was the life of a Gazan. Let me go back to Achim Laneshek. This is a cause to which we will contribute from our benevolent fund, established by certain IDF units on October 8th. The enterprise is tremendous. The one site we visited in Tel Aviv fills the parkade of the city's major conference center. We passed sections of bicycles, strollers, cribs, mattresses, section upon section of clothing sorted by type and size, household appliances, and on. The organization receives the lists of needs of individual households, and thousands upon thousands of customized pallets are prepared and delivered by moving trucks to furnish households, from age-appropriate toys to washing machines. Some in our group asked about religious items, mezuzot, tefillin, and we were told these are not warehoused, but delivered separately, bekavod, as our guide said. The organization has morphed, beginning as an effort to supply totally unequipped army units with protective gear and proper clothing right down to clean underwear. Then it shifted to provide for refugee families residing in pre-furnished temporary quarters. Now they're providing full households for thousands of families still relocated from their homes, but moving into quarters for long-term relocation. The sensitivity is that children should be settled into real homes during their school year. I asked the site manager who showed us around what his day job was. He looked at me oddly, as if I should know, and he said quietly that he is a recognizably famous Israeli. Apparently, creator of a significant number of startup companies, a billionaire. And he acknowledged that the highest level of Israeli business sector has collaborated to create the excellent customer service and administrative efficiency of brothers and sisters in arms, calling upon their every connection with producers of products and suppliers of services. And they modeled this agency to allow for the broadest diversity of volunteer talent, donated time, products, and funds. Volunteers we met said they would go crazy, worrying about endangered family if they were not absorbed in this work. There's tremendous vitality to be seen in Israeli volunteerism. There's the huge social problem of displacement, refugees in their own country. And there is atrocity and survivors of atrocity. We saw some of this too. We drove south, having been issued protective vests and helmets and clearance to go where few are permitted to go. We traveled to the site of the Nova Music Festival and spent significant time at Kibbutz Be'eri on the Gazan border. On the side of the road, we saw what looked like a junkyard of burnt out cars and stopped there. These are the cars of young men and women who tried to escape the machine gun fire erupting early in the morning of October 7th. Most at the festival were killed, and most escaping by car were gunned down, gas tanks hit, and cars erupting in flames. Now, any remaining gas is being siphoned from each car. Then each will be buried, as according to halakha, Jewish law, we bury all human remains. And this will include the blood and human ash in these vehicles. It's not a junkyard after all, rather the site of cars in the process of their own tahara, as it were, of burial rites. Later in Tel Aviv, at a memorial for the festival, I heard a survivor give testimony of her flight and her separation from her husband in the tumult. Her desperate pleas that he jump into a moving car, but he couldn't. There at the memorial is a lost and found, tables of sunglasses and hats and shoes, for example, reminiscent, of course, of other piles of shoes and glasses. But here, every few days, someone identifies something that belongs to them or to their friend, and they take it home. And we went on to Kibbutz Be'eri, one of Israel's largest, oldest, most beautiful kibbutzim. Have any of you been there before? Yeah. A kibbutz beautiful in that it made the desert bloom. Each residential neighborhood named for the species of tree planted there. One would say they lived in the eucalyptus grove or in the olive grove, etc. And the remains of devastation there is indeed surrounded by tranquil meadows, green meadows and groves. Be'eri was also beautiful in its society, a kibbutz populated by young intellectuals and artists who chose this environment as the best way to raise children. Children who rarely wore shoes as they ran and played in the unfenced, continuous yards and play areas. Although other kibbutzim have become less socialist in style, Be'eri was still a kibbutz where all salaries were donated to the collective and where everyone participated in a communal meal each evening. And while there are bomb shelters in most buildings in Israel, here each house has a more fortified safe room. We concentrated our visit on one kibbutz neighborhood. There, the houses were covered with spray-painted Rashi Tevot, abbreviations I couldn't understand, in different colors, red, black, green. So I asked their meaning and was told that for the first 2 weeks after the attack, each building was searched for survivors, for bodies, and for the presence of terrorists still hiding out. The buildings were marked free of danger or of remains, the colors indicating the date of the inspection. As terrorists lurked even into the second week, some found starving after 14 days. Some houses were completely devastated, some totally intact. And there's thought that the 700 infiltrating terrorists targeted buildings with evidence of children, little boots, kiddie pools, tricycles, and the like. And every house has its own horror story. We heard one. Our guide was a philosopher, his wife, an attorney who had grown up on Be'eri. Both worked outside the kibbutz, and their 3 children went home after school to their maternal grandparents who cared for them for a few hours daily. Now his wife and children were living with the rest of the survivors of Be'eri, relocated to another kibbutz. He and a few others had stayed behind to tend the herds, bring in the wheat, and keep the industry, a high-tech printing factory, up and running. He told of waking up before dawn on October 7th to the pinging of a text from a neighbor. There was someone on their roof. Then in the house, go to your safe room. And within minutes, texts were flying. Someone's in my house. I hear them outside. Go to your safe room. It took some time to understand that this was not 1 or 2 lone snipers, and that the situation was not going to pass quickly. Calls were made to the local police, and the message was, "We're coming, take care of yourselves." Residents of Be'eri did not know that law enforcement and IDF were suddenly fielding calls from numerous sites, calls regarding an invasion the magnitude of which had never been seen. And for reasons that will be investigated, they were not prepared, despite evidence that there had been numerous warnings over a period of months that something was afoot. Survivors were sequestered for around 18 hours with no food or toilet, being liberated or escaping. I asked if some of the members of Be'eri had guns, and I was told yes, but all of those were killed. The ones with guns thought they could go out and do something. At Be'eri, in this particular family, the mom and dad and children took to their safe room. They could hear gunfire. The house next door was set aflame. All the children in that family were burned alive. They heard screams erupting in the neighborhood, and one of the little boys said, "Abba, I don't want to die here." Our guide remembers grabbing a baseball bat, gathering his children to him and responding, "We have this bat, and we're not going to die here." Meanwhile, texts were advertising, "If you hear movement outside the safe room, hold on to the door handle with all your might. It's going to be your strength against theirs." His wife was on the phone with the grandparents in their own safe room a few blocks away. She heard gunshots and screaming. The wife soothed her mom, saying that all would be well. But her mom said no. This was the last time that they would speak. and she wanted her family to know how much she loved them. Then the line went dead. Our guide's family survived with their baseball bat and their hand strength, but not the grandparents. There was evidence of shooting in the grandparents' safe room, but no bodies. Their bodies were found strewn on the ground near the Gaza border. Soon after, they saw a ring advertised on the kibbutz Facebook group. This ring had been found on the road out of the kibbutz. Did anyone recognize it? And sure enough, it was the grandmother's ring. And it was then that the story came out about their deaths, that they had been shot and wounded, then dragged away as hostages. But with their infirmities, they couldn't keep up. And they couldn't keep up with their captors and were eliminated on the road. We saw their home and garden completely destroyed by gunfire, toys, and card games poking up in the rubble, the jumble of a jungle gym and kiddie pools still in the yard, the ground around the blown-up kitchen counter strewn with cookies. Our guide told us that he doesn't think all of the families will return to the kibbutz. None will return until it is truly rebuilt. Not just shells of building structures, but a place of rekindled tranquility that can be a refuge for families without physical traces of trauma. And they will not return until there is an ensured security. From there, we went to read a psalm at the grave of Ben Mizrahi at Kibbutz Yavne. There's so much I'm not telling you. I am sure I'll have further opportunities to share, but I do want to take time to say a few words about attitudes I perceived. I've mentioned large-scale commitment to seeing the war through, but by which I think Israelis mean neutralizing Hamas as a source of continuing terror. Even those on the far left, the farthest left, were not wavering. I've mentioned the feeling of unity in the country. I want to also report on the few Arab attitudes I was able to hear. And I have to say that Palestinians are extremely limited in their mobility. Certainly, we couldn't converse with Gazan Palestinians. West Bank Palestinians can't leave their Azor, their area. And even Palestinians in East Jerusalem have very limited mobility. So I don't know how these few encounters that I had represent general trends. For example, we conversed at length with an Israeli Arab of Palestinian descent who is as fully integrated into Israeli society as one could be. He said that Arab Israelis don't consider this their war. They feel removed, and that this may be a way of dealing with being truly part of both sides. They wanted to stop identifying with the lives of Palestinian civilians who are their blood family, but they're not rising in activism. Even so, there is strain for them that there hasn't been before, and some fear. He reported that his daughter and many of her friends are letting go of their positions in Israeli universities and seeking spots at universities in Turkey and Dubai. They're afraid to go to university in this climate. A Bedouin Israeli whom we spoke with was strangely contemptuous of Gazan Palestinians asking why they don't rise up and rebel against Hamas. We spoke with intellectuals who have been famously active in collaborative projects with Palestinians, Yossi Klein Halevi, Michal Muscat Barkan, and they reported feeling distant from that work, feeling the gulf between Jews and Arabs within Israel in a way that sets that work aside at present. And as they reported, for some unforeseen future. I left Israel feeling that there is going to be a Dor Hamidbar, a generation of transformation, and I hope relearning after this is over. Things will not return to what they were. Much ground has been lost in the peace movement, and peace will take a form I cannot yet envision. Yesterday, a few hours after my return, 4 other rabbis and I met with our prime minister. The meeting had been set weeks ago before his statement regarding a conditional ceasefire and before his UN vote for an unconditional ceasefire, and before his further reiteration that ceasefire must be accompanied by a surrender of Hamas in Gaza, return of hostages, and affirmation of Israel's right to be. The intended meeting was a gathering of Jewish and Muslim faith leaders to talk about the effect of a war across the world on our community and relationships here in Canada and in Vancouver. And this meeting did take place. Mr. Trudeau remaining completely silent, listening to the earnest but strained conversation between us. Prior to the scheduled meeting, he met with the rabbis, who each had something to say about Mr. Trudeau's vote and statements. My own request of Mr. Trudeau was that, considering his vote, he make a public statement, not buried in some longer speech, but a simple and direct statement declaring that his call for ceasefire should not be misunderstood as permission for escalation of hate speech or anti-Semitism. That as he calls for a ceasefire in Gaza, he affirms abhorrence and intolerance of anti-Semitism in Canada. Mr. Trudeau took time to explain his position and reasoning regarding the UN vote. 2 things stood out for me. One was his belief that if Arab citizens of Canada continue to feel unseen and unheard, there is no opportunity to engage in conversation. And the other was his concern that the longer Israel herself is involved in neutralizing Hamas, the less chance there is for rehabilitation of Israel in the eyes of the world, and the less chance there is to find our way to a 2-state solution in which he believes. I leave you with this much for now and invite you to remain after our Kiddush to hear about an organization we visited with that I believe is enacting a path to future repair and redemption, a model of dual society functioning at its best with equity and respect. This is the Yad B'Yad, hand in hand, school system that educates Arab and Jewish Israeli children in classrooms where both languages are spoken, and in a milieu that teaches the dual history of the land and its peoples. With prayers for peace, I say a sad Amen.